The room fell silent as William Carter stepped up to the podium. Hundreds of reporters held their breath, cameras flashed, and billions around the world watched their screens. Carter, the NASA administrator, adjusted his tie and looked directly into the main camera. "Today humanity takes its most ambitious step yet," he said, his voice steady despite the historic weight of his words. "NASA, along with our international partners and private sector allies, will establish permanent human settlements on Mars within the next decade." The press room erupted. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions over each other. Carter raised his hands for quiet, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "We call it the Ares program," he continued, "and it will change human history forever." In her office at the Johnson Space Center, Samantha Rhodes watched the announcement with her team. As lead engineer and mission architect, she had spent 5 years of her life preparing for this moment. "Well, it's official now," she said, turning to her colleagues. "No going back." Her deputy, a young engineer named Scott Perry, looked pale. 10 years seems so soon." Samantha nodded. "It is, but we've got the designs ready. The orbital construction facilities are nearly complete. And now," she gestured to the screen where Carter was still speaking, "we have the world's attention and resources." Across the country in Silicon Valley, Joseph Miller watched the same broadcast from his penthouse office. The tech billionaire had already committed $15 billion to the project, but today's announcement would drive his company's stock even higher. "Nancy," he called to his assistant, "get me Carter on the phone as soon as he's done, and schedule a press conference for tomorrow. We'll announce the new funding package." Joseph walked to the window, looking up at the sky. Mars was not visible in the daytime, but he stared upward anyway, imagining the red planet that would soon bear his name on its first city, Millerville. Catherine Franklin did not watch the announcement live. The astrobiologist was deep underground in a biosafety lab examining soil samples returned by the most recent Mars rover. When her phone began buzzing nonstop, she finally pulled off her gloves and checked it. "So they're really doing it," she murmured, scanning the news alerts. Catherine had been arguing for years that they needed more data before sending humans to Mars permanently. Something about the latest samples bothered her, microscopic structures that defied easy explanation. She picked up her secure line to call Daniel Harrison, the military liaison assigned to her project. "Dan, have you seen the news?" she asked, when he answered. "Watching it now," he replied. "Carter's making it sound like a done deal." "We need to talk about these samples," Catherine said. "Something isn't right." "Not over the phone," Daniel said quickly. "Meet me at the usual place in an hour." 6 months later, the world's excitement had transformed into a fever pitch of competition. What had started as an international cooperation project was splitting along old geopolitical lines. William Carter stood in the White House Situation Room, facing the President and Joint Chiefs. "The Chinese have accelerated their program," he explained, pointing to satellite images on the main screen. "Their orbital assembly facility is ahead of schedule. They could beat us to Mars." "That cannot happen," the President said firmly. "Whatever resources you need, you've got them." Carter nodded, but his stomach churned. The timeline was already dangerously tight. Pushing it further would increase risks dramatically. Meanwhile, in orbit, the first pieces of the colony ships were coming together. Samantha Rhodes floated in a spacewalk suit, inspecting the massive framework that would become the MSV Pioneer, the fleet's command vessel. "How's it looking out there?" asked Scott Perry through the comm system. "Big," Samantha replied, trying to take in the scale of what they were building. "Really big." The structure stretched over 300 meters in length, with only the skeleton in place so far. When completed, it would house hundreds of colonists and all the command systems needed to coordinate the fleet. Back on Earth, Joseph Miller's promised funding had expanded to include a purpose-built AI system for the mission. His company's best programmers worked around the clock to create what he called the brain of our new civilization. "It will manage everything," he explained to reporters during a tour of his facility. "Life support, communication, resource allocation, Even conflict resolution, the first society designed from scratch by artificial intelligence. What Joseph didn't mention was that his company would retain control of critical parts of the AI's programming, ensuring his influence would extend all the way to Mars. At NASA's Deep Space Network facility, Catherine Franklin and Daniel Harrison met in a secure room late at night. With them was Ryan Adams, a communications specialist who had discovered something troubling. "Show her," Daniel said. Ryan pulled up a series of waveforms on his tablet. "These are the standard communications we receive from the Mars rovers and orbiters. Nice and clean, right?" Catherine nodded. "Now look at these," Ryan continued, showing a second set. "These started appearing 3 months ago, embedded in the regular transmissions." Catherine studied the patterns. "They're not random." "No," Ryan agreed. "They repeat, with variations, but there's definitely structure." "Natural phenomena?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "We've ruled that out, and it's not any Earth-based interference either." Catherine felt a chill run down her spine. "You're saying something on Mars is adding signals to our communications?" "Or someone," Ryan said quietly. "We've tried to bring this to Carter's attention," Daniel explained. "But with the accelerated timeline and the competition with China, nobody wants to hear about mysterious signals. They're calling it equipment malfunction," Ryan added bitterly. Catherine pulled out her secure tablet and brought up images of the microscopic structures she'd been studying. "Look at these. From the latest soil samples. They move. Very slowly, but they move. I think they're responding to electrical impulses." The three looked at each other, the same realization dawning on all of them. "Mars isn't dead," Catherine whispered. As the massive colony ships took shape in orbit and politicians made grand speeches about humanity's multiplanetary future, no one was listening to the warnings. The Ares program pushed forward, career ambitions, and national pride drowning out the few cautious voices. The date for humanity's great leap was set. The countdown had begun, and on Mars, something waited. 3 years passed in a blur of frantic activity. The 5 massive colony ships hung in Earth orbit like metal islands against the blackness of space. Thousands of workers in spacesuits swarmed around them, making final adjustments before the historic departure. Captain Elizabeth Ward stood at the viewport of the MSV Pioneer, watching Earth rotate slowly below. After 20 years in the Navy and 5 in NASA's astronaut program, she now commanded humanity's most ambitious mission. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Elizabeth turned to see Dr. Richard Gonzalez, the fleet's chief medical officer. "I keep thinking this might be the last time I see it," she admitted. Richard nodded. "Most of us will never return. That's the deal we made." "Final checks are complete, Captain," reported Alan Foster as he floated into the command center. The young communications specialist pushed himself to a stop using a handrail. "All 5 ships report ready for departure." Elizabeth took a deep breath. "Send the message to Mission Control. The fleet is go for Mars injection burn." Across the 5 ships, 3,218 colonists prepared for departure. They represented the best minds Earth had to offer: engineers, doctors, farmers, teachers, and scientists. Each had been chosen from millions of applicants, and each knew they were likely leaving Earth forever. Patricia Wilson finished securing the plants in the massive hydroponics bay aboard the MSV Horizon. As the fleet's agriculture expert, she was responsible for growing food during the 9-month journey and establishing farms on Mars. "All secure?" asked Gregory Jones, the mining engineer who had been helping her. Patricia nodded. "These plants are our lifeline. If they die, we all die." Gregory smiled. "No pressure then." Throughout the fleet, similar conversations took place as the colonists faced the reality of their journey. For all the training and preparation, nothing could fully prepare them for leaving their home planet behind. In Mission Control, William Carter watched as the countdown reached 0. The massive engines of the 5 colony ships fired simultaneously, pushing them out of Earth orbit and onto their Mars trajectory. "Godspeed," he whispered as the ships grew smaller on the tracking screens. Beside him, Catherine Franklin watched, with mixed emotions. Despite her warnings about the strange signals, the mission had proceeded. In the end, she had joined the science team analyzing data from Mars, hoping to learn more about her discoveries before the colonists arrived. "They're on their way," Daniel Harrison said, joining her. "Let's hope we're wrong about what's waiting for them." 2 months into the journey, life aboard the colony ships settled into a routine. The 5 vessels traveled in formation, separated by 10 kilometers each for safety, but connected by constant communication. Captain Ward held daily briefings with the other ship leaders, reviewing system status and addressing any concerns. So far, the journey had been smoother than expected. Until today. "We're seeing something strange in the communications array," Alan Foster reported during the morning briefing. His face on the video screen looked troubled. "Define strange?" Elizabeth asked. "Patterns in the background radiation. At first I thought it was just normal space noise, but it's organized somehow, and it's getting stronger as we get closer to Mars." Elizabeth frowned. "Could it be interference from home?" Alan shook his head. "We're too far now. Whatever this is, it's coming from ahead of us." That night, throughout the fleet, colonists reported unusual dreams. Dr. Richard Gonzalez found himself overwhelmed with patients describing the same experience. Visions of vast underground tunnels and strange machinery. "It has to be stress," he told Elizabeth in her private quarters. "Mass hysteria spreading through the ships." Elizabeth wasn't convinced. "All reporting the exact same details? That's not how hysteria works." "Then what's your explanation?" Richard E. asked. Before she could answer, the ship's AI system interrupted. "Captain, anomaly detected in life support systems on MSV Discovery." Elizabeth rushed to the command center with Richard close behind. The screens showed flashing red warnings across the Discovery systems. "What's happening?" she demanded. "Unknown," the AI replied. "Discovery reports multiple system failures occurring simultaneously. Hull integrity compromised in Science Section 3. Elizabeth opened a direct channel. "Discovery, this is Captain Ward. Report status." Static filled the channel for several seconds before a breathless voice came through. "Pioneer, this is Discovery. We have a major breach in the outer hull. 14. Crew members in Section 3 they're gone. Emergency bulkheads activated, but we're losing atmosphere in adjacent sections." Elizabeth's training took over. "Dispatch rescue teams immediately. Prepare to receive survivors from Discovery. All ships, full alert status." In the chaos that followed, rescue shuttles deployed from Pioneer and Seeker, racing to the stricken Discovery. The surviving crew evacuated, bringing with them terrifying reports. "It just opened," one scientist told Elizabeth after being brought aboard Pioneer. "The hull split open like something cut it from the outside, but there was nothing there." Gregory Jones, who had helped with the rescue, had a different theory. "I inspected the breach site. Those weren't external cuts. Something exploded outward from inside the hull. Suspicion spread through the fleet like wildfire. If the damage came from inside, it meant sabotage. But who would destroy their own lifeline, millions of kilometers from Earth?" Captain Ward established a task force to investigate, led by security teams from each ship. As they examined the evidence, 3 distinct theories emerged. Some believed equipment failure caused the accident. The ships had been built in a rush, cutting corners to beat international competitors. Others suspected deliberate sabotage, pointing to tensions between national factions within the colony fleet. The dream patterns and communication anomalies were seen as psychological warfare. A third group, growing larger each day, believed something unknown was reaching out to them from Mars, interfering with both their technology and their minds. Elizabeth found herself losing sleep as the theories circulated. The fleet was still 7 months from Mars, and already fear and suspicion threatened to tear them apart. One night, alone in her quarters, she heard a faint voice coming from her personal communication device. It wasn't Alan or any voice she recognized. "Not ready for you," the voice whispered before dissolving into static. When she reported this to her senior staff the next morning, She saw the same fear in their eyes that she felt herself. "We continue on mission," she told them firmly. "But from now on, no one works alone. Buddy system throughout the fleet. And I want continuous monitoring of all communications, especially anything directed toward Mars." As the 5 ships, now 4, with the Discovery limping along on partial power, continued their journey, the strange dreams intensified. The communication anomalies grew stronger, and deep within the computer systems of each vessel, something began to change the programming line by line, preparing for arrival. Mars grew larger in their viewports each day, no longer just a red dot, but a world waiting for them. What exactly was waiting? None of them knew for certain. The fleet entered Mars orbit after 8 months of increasingly tense travel. The red planet filled their viewports, no longer a distant goal, but their new reality. For many colonists, the sight brought relief. Whatever waited for them below, at least the psychological pressure of deep space travel was ending. Captain Elizabeth Ward called a final briefing before the first landing team departed. "Our scans show some irregularities," she explained to the assembled mission leaders. The command center of the Pioneer was crowded with the top experts from each ship. "What kind of irregularities?" asked Laura Bennett, commander of the first landing team. Elizabeth nodded to Alan Foster, who pulled up a series of images on the main screen. "These structures weren't in any of our previous reconnaissance data," Alan explained, pointing to several. "Geometric shapes partially visible beneath the Martian soil. And the atmospheric readings don't match what our probes reported a year ago." Marcus Reynolds, the planetary geologist assigned to the landing team, leaned forward. "Those formations can't be natural." "That's not all," Elizabeth continued. "We've detected energy readings from below the surface. Very faint, but definitely there." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "Are we saying Mars is inhabited?" asked Victor Chen, the communications technician for the landing team. "We're saying we don't know what's down there," Elizabeth replied carefully. "Which is why we've added someone to your team." She gestured to a woman standing quietly at the back of the room. "This is Dr. Olivia Lewis, our head of security. And this," she pointed to a thin man beside Olivia, "is Dr. Andrew Parker. He's a xenobiologist." Laura looked surprised. "We didn't plan for a xenobiologist." "Plans change," Elizabeth said firmly. "Your mission remains the same. Establish the primary base at the predetermined site, but proceed with extreme caution. Any sign of anything unusual, you report immediately." 6 hours later, the landing shuttle detached from the Pioneer and began its descent to the Martian surface. Inside, the team of 12 specialists checked their equipment one final time. Laura felt the weight of responsibility as she watched the red landscape grow closer through the viewport. Billions of dollars, thousands of lives, and humanity's future depended on what they found and what found them. The shuttle landed in Acidalia Planitia, a vast plain selected years ago as the ideal colony site. As the dust settled, Laura led the first human steps onto Martian soil. "Beginning initial survey," she reported back to the ships. "Conditions match expected parameters. Proceeding to Site Alpha for habitat construction." The landing team worked, methodically setting up the first temporary shelters and deploying equipment. Everything went according to plan until Marcus called Laura over to a spot about half a kilometer from the landing site. "The ground readings are off the charts here," he said, showing her his scanner. "There's something massive underneath us." Laura frowned. "How deep?" "Not very. Maybe 20 meters. She made a decision. "Get the ground-penetrating radar over here, but keep this quiet for now." The radar confirmed Marcus's findings. A large structure lay beneath them, with tunnel systems extending outward like spokes from a wheel. "We need to inform the fleet," Andrew Parker said when Laura showed him the results. "And we will," she assured him. "But first, I want to know what we're dealing with." Against protocol but following her instincts, Laura organized a small team: herself, Marcus, Victor, Olivia, and Andrew. Using a portable drilling rig, they began excavating down to the structure. 17 meters, Marcus announced as the drill broke through into an open space below. "We've hit a cavity." They lowered lights and cameras into the hole. The footage showed a perfectly smooth tunnel, with walls made of a material that resembled polished stone but wasn't any mineral they recognized. "We're going down," Laura decided after reporting their discovery to Captain Ward. Descending into the tunnel was like entering another world. The air was breathable but stale, as if it had been sealed for centuries. The tunnel curved gently downward, leading deeper into the Martian crust. "These markings," Andrew said, pointing to symbols etched into the walls. "They're not random. This is language." Victor ran his hand over one of the markings, and suddenly the tunnel was bathed in soft blue light. "I didn't touch anything else," he said quickly as everyone tensed. "It responded to human touch." Andrew whispered in awe. "It knows we're here." They followed the illuminated tunnel until it opened into a vast chamber. The space stretched hundreds of meters in every direction, filled with machinery unlike anything humans had built. In the center stood what appeared to be control stations arranged in a circle. "This is impossible," Marcus breathed. "Our scans never showed anything this big." "Because it wasn't active until recently," Andrew suggested. "Something woke it up." Or, "Someone," Laura added. As if in response to her words, a section of the floor began to move. A platform rose from below, carrying what could only be described as a Martian. The being stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a slender body covered in what looked like flexible armor. Its head was elongated, with no visible mouth but 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern. It had 4 arms, each ending in hands with 6 fingers. Laura stepped forward, her heart racing. "We come in peace," she said, using the phrase humans had imagined saying to aliens for centuries. The Martian made no sound. Instead, a series of images flashed in Laura's mind. Stars, planets, machines, and finally humans arriving on Mars. "Telepathy," Andrew gasped. "They communicate through thought." More images filled their minds. Martians going into chamber-like devices, sleeping, waiting. A clock or calendar counting down. Then humans, detected first through their probes, then through their signals. The message was clear, even without words. The Martians had been dormant, not dead, and humanity had awakened them. Laura tried to project peaceful thoughts, images of cooperation and shared knowledge. The Martians' response was immediate and devastating. A wave of emotion hit them all. Violation, intrusion, anger. The being raised one hand, and all their communication devices went dead simultaneously. "We need to get back to the surface," Olivia said urgently. "Now." As they retreated toward the tunnel, more platforms rose from below, bringing dozens of Martians. None moved to stop them, but Laura felt their collective consciousness watching, judging. When they reached the surface, they found their equipment failing. The shuttle's systems were offline. Above them, the fleet reported similar issues, critical systems shutting down one by one. "They don't see us as visitors," Laura told Captain Ward in their last communication before the satellite link failed. "They see us as invaders." Across the landing site, the ground began to tremble as more ancient Martian systems activated. What had been planned as humanity's greatest achievement, becoming a multiplanetary species, was rapidly becoming its greatest crisis. The first contact had been made, and the Martians were not pleased. The news reached Earth 3 hours after contact. Emergency. Martian life discovered. Hostile response. Systems failing. That brief message, sent through backup channels before communications went completely dark, threw Earth into chaos. Emergency. Meetings were called in every major government. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders made conflicting proclamations about the meaning of alien life. General Frank Wilson was pulled from retirement to lead Earth's military response. As a veteran of 3 wars, he had never imagined his final mission would be against an alien civilization. "What do we know about their capabilities?" he asked the hastily assembled team at Space Command headquarters. "Very little," admitted the lead scientist. "The landing team found some kind of dormant civilization. Their technology appears far beyond ours. They've already disabled most systems on our ships and the ground base. Frank frowned. Casualties? None reported yet. But we've lost contact with the fleet. The general stood up. Prepare a rescue mission, arm every ship we can get to Mars. We're bringing our people home. On Mars, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The landing team had made it back to the main base, but all attempts to communicate with the fleet had failed. Laura Bennett called an emergency meeting of all 36 colonists who had landed. We need to understand what we're dealing with, she said. The Martians were in some kind of suspended animation. Our presence woke them up. And they're not happy about it, added Andrew Parker, who had been analyzing the telepathic images they received. What do they want? Asked one of the engineers. That's just it, Laura replied. They don't seem to understand individual wants. When they communicated, it felt like a hive mind. One consciousness spread across many bodies. The colonists split into 3 groups with different approaches to the crisis. Harold Schmidt, a senior engineer, led those who believed peaceful coexistence was possible. We need to establish communication, he insisted. Show them we're not a threat. Diana Rogers, the chief systems engineer, had a different idea. Their technology is amazing. If we could understand it, maybe adapt it, we could survive here even without support from the fleet. Kevin Wright, head of security, took a harder line. We need defenses. These beings shut down our tech with a wave of their hand. Who knows what else they can do? Above them, in orbit, Captain Elizabeth Ward faced her own crisis. With critical systems failing across all ships, the 3,000 colonists still in space were in grave danger. Life support is stable for now, reported Dr. Richard Gonzalez. But navigation, propulsion, and communications are offline. We're drifting. Elizabeth made a difficult decision. We evacuate as many as possible to the surface. The shuttles still work on manual controls. At least on Mars, they'll have a chance. As the first shuttles descended, Earth was preparing its response. 3 military spacecraft, hastily converted from existing designs, launched with skeleton crews of volunteers. Their mission: rescue if possible, retaliation if necessary. On Mars, Susan Campbell, the team's linguistic expert, had an insight while studying the symbols in the Martian tunnels. These aren't words, she explained to Laura. They're mathematical formulas. Their entire language seems to be based on math, not sounds or letters. Working with Victor Chen, Susan created a basic numerical communication system. When another Martian appeared at the edge of their base perimeter, she approached it slowly, projecting simple mathematical patterns through a device Victor had built. The Martian responded with more complex patterns. For 3 hours, they exchanged increasingly sophisticated mathematical concepts, building a primitive but functional communication bridge. Through this mathematical conversation, Susan learned something critical. The Martians had entered hibernation deliberately after detecting a massive solar event approaching their system. They had calculated its arrival to within a year and had hidden underground to survive. They thought we were the threat they were waiting for, Susan reported back. Our radio signals, probes, and then our ships triggered their defensive protocols. They didn't realize we were just another species. This breakthrough came just as the military ships from Earth reached Mars orbit. General Frank Wilson, commanding the lead vessel, was preparing to deploy weapons when Susan's message reached them through the primitive mathematical communication channel she had established. Hold fire, Frank ordered. We might have a diplomatic opening. But not all humans were interested in diplomacy. A faction of colonists led by a man named Peter Dawson had broken away, venturing into the Martian tunnels armed with improvised weapons. They believed conquering the alien technology was humanity's only hope. Their unauthorized mission ended in disaster when they damaged a critical Martian system. Automatic defenses activated, killing 3 colonists and triggering a cascade of aggressive responses from the Martian hive mind. Across the surface, ancient weapons platforms rose from the dust. In orbit, the human ships detected energy buildups aimed at them. War had begun despite the efforts of those working for peace. The first Martian attack disabled 2 of Earth's military vessels. The third, under General Wilson's command, managed to deploy its own weapons, destroying several Martian defense platforms. On the surface, the human colony became a battleground. Martian machines emerged from tunnels, while humans defended their base with whatever weapons they had. In the chaos, Susan Campbell refused to give up on communication. With the help of a Martian who seemed more open to contact, one the humans named Elder due to its distinctive markings, she discovered a critical fact. The cosmic threat the Martians had hibernated to avoid was real and still coming. It's a massive solar flare, she explained to Laura and General Wilson, who had managed to land his damaged ship. Bigger than anything in recorded history. The Martians detected it centuries ago and calculated its arrival. When? Asked Frank. 3 months from now, Susan replied. Their calculations show it will sterilize the surface of both Mars and Earth unless proper protections are in place. The revelation changed everything. Suddenly, the two species faced a common enemy, a solar cataclysm that threatened both their futures. Frank made a bold decision. We need to propose an alliance, not for us, not for them, but for survival. As human and Martian forces continued to clash across the Martian surface, a small group from both sides began working against time to verify the threat and find a solution. The war for Mars had become a race against extinction. Time was running out. With only 8 weeks remaining before the predicted solar catastrophe, both humans and Martians faced extinction. The fighting had diminished but not stopped entirely, as factions on both sides remained distrustful. Barbara Mitchell, a systems engineer who had been studying Martian technology, emerged as the leader of the unified human-Martian response team. Her ability to see problems from multiple angles made her perfect for bridging the gap between two very different species. The Martians have been preparing for this event for centuries, she explained to the assembled team of humans and their Martian counterparts. They met in a neutral zone between the human base and the main Martian facility. Their hibernation technology was only part of the plan. The Martian Elder, as the humans called the senior being who worked with them, projected a series of images into their minds. Barbara had learned to interpret these telepathic communications. They built a planetary shield system. She translated for those who couldn't receive the mental images clearly. But it was designed to protect Mars alone, and it's incomplete. They went into hibernation before finishing it. John Walsh, an engineer who had been working closely with Martian technology, stood up. I think I understand their design. It's brilliant, but the power requirements are enormous. They planned to use Mars' core energy, but the connections were never completed. Can we help finish it? General Frank Wilson asked. Despite his military background, he had become a strong advocate for cooperation. Yes, John replied. But even if we do, it only protects Mars. Earth remains vulnerable. Linda Cooper, who had expanded on Susan Campbell's work to develop a more comprehensive translation system, raised an important point. Could we modify the design to extend protection to Earth as well? The Martian Elder's response came as a surprise to everyone. Rather than rejection, the being projected images of both planets surrounded by a protective field. They considered this, Linda translated in amazement. But they lacked enough materials on Mars alone. Hope surged through the human representatives. For the first time, a true collaboration seemed possible. If the Martians were willing to protect Earth as well as Mars, maybe both species could survive. Barbara took charge of organizing the massive project. Teams of humans and Martians were assigned to different aspects of the shield system. John Walsh worked on merging human and Martian technology, creating interfaces that allowed the two very different engineering approaches to function together. Meanwhile, in orbit, Captain Elizabeth Ward coordinated the fleet's resources. The ship's manufacturing facilities, originally designed to build the Mars colony, were repurposed to create components for the shield system. Progress was steady but too slow. With 4 weeks remaining, projections showed they would complete the shield days after the solar flare hit. Every hour became precious as both species worked around the clock. On Earth, governments pooled resources to prepare for the worst. Underground shelters were readied. though scientists doubted they would provide adequate protection against a flare of the predicted magnitude. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Paul Garcia, a shuttle pilot who had been ferrying personnel between the surface and orbiting ships, had an insight while observing the Martian propulsion technology. "Their engines don't just move things," he explained to Barbara. "They bend space itself in tiny amounts. What if we used that principle to deploy the shield faster?" The idea was revolutionary. Instead of building the entire shield piece by piece, they could create a central core and use modified Martian engines to extend its effect across a much wider area. With the new approach, the timeline shortened dramatically. The shield could be ready with days to spare, if everything went perfectly. As components came together, Amanda Roberts, a scientist working with Martian historical data, made a discovery that changed their understanding of their solar system. "This isn't the first time this has happened," she announced. "There's evidence of similar solar events every few thousand years. The last one wiped out an earlier Martian civilization that lived on the surface. That's why the current Martians evolved to live underground." The revelation added urgency to their work. This wasn't just about surviving one event, but about preparing both planets for a recurring cosmic threat. With 1 week remaining, the shield system was ready for deployment. The central hub, a massive structure combining the best of human and Martian technology, orbited between the two planets. Powered by energy from both worlds, it represented the first truly interspecies collaboration in the solar system's history. Paul Garcia volunteered to pilot the crucial mission to activate the system. The risks were enormous. Being so close to the hub when it activated meant exposure to energies no human had ever experienced. "Someone has to do it," he said simply when Barbara questioned his decision. "The automatic systems might fail. We can't take that chance." As Paul's shuttle approached the hub, final preparations were made on both planets. Emergency shelters were sealed. All non-essential systems were shut down to minimize damage from electromagnetic pulses. From her position on the command ship, Elizabeth Ward watched the countdown reach 0. "Activate the shield," she ordered. Paul pushed the final sequence of controls. The hub flared to life, brightness expanding outward in a wave that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. For a moment, his shuttle was silhouetted against the energy field before being engulfed. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see if the system would work as designed. Slowly, a shimmering barrier formed, expanding to encompass first Mars, then continuing outward toward Earth. Instrumentation showed the shield taking hold, its energy signature stabilizing. 3 days later, the solar flare arrived. The radiation wave struck the shield with incredible force. On both planets, people watched as the sky lit up with colors never before seen by human or Martian eyes. The shield held. When the danger passed, celebrations erupted across two worlds. Paul Garcia's shuttle, damaged but intact, returned to a IR hero's welcome. The pilot emerged exhausted but alive, proof that the impossible had been accomplished. In the months that followed, the temporary alliance became permanent. A new settlement was established at the Shield Hub's ground control station, named Unity City. Neither fully human nor fully Martian, it represented something entirely new in the solar system. Barbara Mitchell stood at the inauguration ceremony, watching representatives from both species working side by side. "We came to Mars thinking colonization would be our greatest achievement," she said in her address. "Instead, we found that our greatest accomplishment wasn't reaching Mars, but learning to share it." As humans and Martians continued to learn from each other, the solar system's first truly interspecies civilization began to take shape. The chaos of first contact had nearly led to extinction, but in facing a common threat, two worlds had found a new beginning.